All right, and welcome in everybody. Hope you're having a fantabulous, awesome freaking day. My name is Garrett Shumake, and you are listening to the Shumake Take, and welcome in to Predictions versus Reality. The Shumake Take off-season series continues with the NFC South today as we talk about the second place team and one of the more disappointing teams this season to me, the Atlanta Falcons. This Atlanta Falcons team was a tale of just a bunch of promise and a bunch of blah at the end. And it's unfortunate because the Atlanta Falcons were one of the teams that I thought were going to be, taking a step forward this year. But before we begin, let's talk about what Predictions versus Reality is all about. If you know what Predictions versus Reality is about, you can go ahead and move to the timestamp down below, which, by the way, there is more improved timestamps now as the structure of the show has been revamped. But for those of you that don't know, I did schedule prediction videos back in August before the 2024 season began. And in there, I projected every single team, why I thought they would be where they are. And ultimately, that was my that was my prediction. It was my prediction. There we go. Right? And so we're going to look back on that, and then we're going to look at what actually happened, right? We're going to look at what went right or what went wrong for each team, or overall we'll explain what happened if the record was about the same. And then we'll talk about the stat leaders, how those players did, how their years went, and then we'll talk about some other stuff like how they can get better. Right? The three biggest needs that they need to address going into the offseason, and overall where I think they could be and what they could look like if things go to plan. So for the Atlanta Falcons, what did I say in August when I made that video? I had the Atlanta Falcons going 10-7. And my thing going into the year was the Atlanta Falcons in the NFC South, it was their division to lose. Because at the time, on paper, they looked like the clear best team in that division. You went and got Kirk Cousins, gave him that big money. You had Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier, Drake London. You signed Darnell Mooney. You had Kyle Pitts, tight end, which people still held out hope for. At this point, all hope is gone for that guy. But you had a top 10 offensive line, right? And you had a defense that was sneakily good in 2023. So you look at a team that, okay, they got better at positions they needed to get better at, and here we go. Like, we got a team now in Atlanta that actually could be a playoff team. And overall, why I had it, I mentioned Kirk, the skill position players. They added Zach Robinson as their offensive coordinator, came from LA from that Sean McVay scheme, which is always, well, not always, but has, most of the time proven to have success on that side of the ball, right? And I also mentioned, the defense being improved, right? Their defense was sneakily good, but they made splash moves. They added Matt Judon in a trade. They added Justin Simmons, right? But I thought this unit would be a top 12, top 13 unit. They didn't need to be a top tier group, but finishing 12th and 13th would have been respectable enough and with his offense to make a playoff push. And of course, like I mentioned, they were the clear-cut favorite. But what actually happened? So the Falcons ended up finishing 8-9, and after, as I mentioned before, second in the NFC South. Their offense ranked 6th, but their defense ranked 23rd. They made a dip this year, and I'm not talking a little drop off. They took a dip. They took a big dip. They were like around 11th, 12th, 13th last year. They may have been in the bottom of the top 10, and you dropped into the 20s, which, that's not great. But we'll talk more about it here at the end. Their three best wins were against Tampa, where they beat them 30-36 in overtime. It was a great game. Cardell Hodge caught that game-winning touchdown, 60-plus yarder, caught it and ran all the way home, right? And then week 2 against Philly, they won 22-21 at Philly. It was a very solid win for them. And then they beat Tampa in Tampa 31-26, sweeping them, which honestly, in retrospect, makes the fact that they missed the playoffs that much more hurtful, because they had the sweep on Tampa. They had the tiebreaker, and all they had to do was win their games and win out at the end to make the playoffs, and they flamed out. But going into the stat leaders, Kirk Cousins was the guy for the majority of the way. He finished with 66% completion percentage, 3,508 yards, 18 touchdowns, 16 interceptions. Kirk Cousins, while I was on a soapbox, I was upset, for a lack of a better word, that they benched Kirk Cousins because Michael Penix was not ready to start. He's put into a situation that's not favorable for him. And Kirk Cousins, he's going up against some defenses that aren't great. So, okay, he had an opportunity to bounce back, but okay. But all that being said, I still stand by what I said. I'm not going to take that back. But I do need to acknowledge that Kirk Cousins, in that stretch of games, that 4-game losing streak, and then the barely got a win against the Raiders, Kirk Cousins, I'll also include the slow start to the year that he had, right? He looked like a guy who was in his mid-30s coming off of an Achilles injury. And you could tell that his arm strength wasn't all there. You could tell that his decision-making wasn't all there because of it. A lot of the interceptions that he threw were just underthrown, just did not have the juice to get there like we're used to seeing Kirk being able to deliver. And definitely, he showed his age, which, in retrospect, yeah, that played a role in his benching. Was it the right move? No. But at least there's now more clarity to where, okay, I can somewhat understand it. At least there's a realm where there's at least a little bit of sense to me made out of it, right? It wasn't just a complete dumb decision like I thought it was at the time. At least now there's a little bit of sense made to the decision, in my opinion. But then Michael Penix Jr. started the last 3 games. In those 3 games, he had 58% completion percentage, 775 yards, 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Honestly, the three interceptions, maybe one of those were his fault. 2 of them were definitely not his fault. Obviously, remember the one Kyle Pitts had the catch in his hands, spun around, and just threw it right to a defender, which, I mean, if you're Michael Penix, what are you supposed to do, dude? Obviously that's going to go on his stat sheet, but, Kyle Pitts literally just threw the game right there. I don't know what to do there. You can't really fault him. And then there was another interception that wasn't his fault. And the third one, it was a little bit iffy, but some blame could be thrown on him. So really his interceptions could be 3-1 or 3-0, more realistically if you look at the tape. But either way, I thought overall he played fine. He showed good things. He showed promise. A lot of the fundamental stuff he had, he was fine there too, getting able to, read the field quickly, go through your progressions, anticipate, get the ball out on time, stuff like that. The core fundamentals of playing quarterback, you saw that, which is what I really like to see. Because people, rookie quarterbacks, they tend to, make a dazzling play here, make a dazzling play there, and that's what people like to judge. Okay, this quarterback can do that. Some people had hype about Will Levis going into 2023 because of his 4-touchdown game against Atlanta and then the comeback win against Miami. But Will Levis, if you look at the tape, Will Levis, a lot of the fundamental X's and O's parts of football, he was not that good at. He was not that good and was behind the curve. So going into 2024, as film analysis videos came out and that came to light, there's a reason why a lot of people weren't hyped on Will Levis. Looking at Michael Penix, on the other hand, like I mentioned, a lot of that stuff he was able to do pretty well. Wasn't great, of course, he's a rookie. But you saw signs of him being able to do that, and that's what you like to see. I don't need to see all these dazzling plays from a rookie quarterback. If you can do the fundamentals right, that's what I look for most, because that shows me that you can improve on that, and you belong in the NFL. You belong in the NFL. If you can do the small stuff right as a rookie, you belong. And Michael Penix showed that he could do those things, which indicates to me that he could belong in the NFL as a franchise quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons. Going into the running game, Bijan Robinson, 304 carries, which is top 3 in the NFL. I can't remember exactly where he ranked. I forgot to mark it down here. But he finished with 1,456 yards, which was 3rd in the NFL, 14 rushing touchdowns, 4.8 yards per carry. He also added 61 catches for 431 yards, and 1 receiving touchdown. Bijan Robinson had the best year of his career so far. He looked like the guy that people wanted to see it coming out of Texas. And now with, better weapons around him and a better coach running the offense, now you can see what Bijan Robinson can truly do. And now taking him at 7th overall makes a little bit more sense. So Bijan Robinson, obviously, he had a fantastic year, and he was the engine that made this offense run. While Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix were doing their thing, Darnell Mooney and Drake London, who we're going to talk about in a second, were doing their things. Bijan Robinson was that engine that made this offense hum. And him playing well kind of attributed to the rest of the offense playing better around him. And then his running mate, Tyler Algier, finished with 137 carries, 644 yards, 3 touchdowns, and added 4.7 yards per carry. Second tier back, great guy there, nothing to complain about. And then you get into the receiving game. Drake London, he had 100 catches, 1,279 yards, which was 4th in the NFL, 9 receiving touchdowns. He also had a career year, which is a credit to Zach Robinson, the offensive coordinator. And Drake London, he was honestly fantastic to me. He was reliable. He made big plays. And honestly, there's a reason. Like, now you look at this, kind of like why, you look back at why Bijan Robinson was drafted where he was drafted, and kind of makes sense now. Drafting Drake London being the first receiver off the board makes more sense. I mean, looking at his tape at USC, he was a guy that was really, really well polished for the position. He wasn't considered a generational talent, but he was considered a very highly touted wide receiver prospect coming out of USC at the time. So seeing what he's able to do this year reaffirms a lot of people, a lot of people said coming out, and he played well. He played really well and was a big piece of this offense and a big key to their success. And then Darnell Mooney, the guy who was lined up next to him, had 64 grabs for 992 yards, 5 touchdowns. He also had a career year. I take that back. He did have 1,000 yards 1 year with the Chicago Bears. But even if so, this is one of the best years he's had of his career. Again, continued to be, he kind of had a couple down years at the end of his tenure in Chicago, right? But now in Atlanta, he doesn't have to be the number one guy. He's got great pieces around him. He's going to play well. And guess what? He played well. Whoop-de-doo. They signed him to a contract, like a 3-year deal. You got good value for him so far. And he is a solid wide receiver too. There you go. And then their slot guy, Ray McLeod, at 62 catches, 686 yards, and a touchdown. Also had a career year. Ray McLeod has always been known to be a returner. But as a receiver, also in his 30s, he was pretty good. He was pretty darn good. Almost had dang near 700 yards, 60 catches, only had 1 touchdown. But I mean, at the same time, for how old he was and for what he's been in the NFL, this is a really good year for him. And while he's probably going to be gone, I don't know about this year. He might be a free agent. Maybe. I can't remember if he is. But if he is, or if he is after 2025, getting the most out of Ray McLeod is another big testament to Zach Robinson. And him playing well, it's awesome. It was absolutely awesome to see that happen for him. It was good for him. And then in the tackling game, Caden Ellis had 151 tackles, 5 sacks, 8 tackles for loss, and an interception. He was a really good player for the Falcons defense, one of the few truly bright spots on that unit. But tackling-wise, there wasn't anybody else that broke 100, I think. Maybe one other guy did. I can't remember. But tackling was an issue for the Atlanta Falcons this year. And their biggest issue was their pass rush. Arnold Ebitike had 6 sacks. And that's not the type of guy you want as your leading pass rusher. He's a good player. I'm not going to take anything away from him. But you signed Matt Judon. You have Grady Jarrett, right? Who's not like the big, big defensive tackle, pass rusher. Like, he's not like as dominant as he used to be, right? He's in his 30s now, but he's still a good defensive tackle. He's still one of the top ones in the league, in my opinion. He's still up there, right? But they needed to get more from this pass rush that they simply did not get. And then the interceptions department, Jesse Bates had led the team before, had another really good year. He's been great for them ever since he's gotten there. But outside of those few players, and maybe a couple more in there, like AJ Terrell, and there's maybe a couple others that I'm not mentioning, Justin Simmons as well, right? This defense really, really underwhelmed. Talking about what went wrong, let's stop for a second. What went wrong with this team? The thing was just this defensive line underwhelmed. The defense overall underwhelmed, right? The big question was on the D-line. They drafted a bunch of young talent, Calais Campbell, Bud Dupree, these veteran guys that boosted the unit last year. They left, and so the young guys had to step up, and they simply couldn't. And the Matt Judon trade also completely fell apart. He was a bust. It was a total bust. He played like he was 32. He just did not provide the juice that we thought that he would provide. And he was coming off of an injury, which also did not help. But overall, they finished 15th in run defense, but in the pass rush, where it was really bad, they were 31st and had 31 sacks. And they're also 28th in the red zone, 31st on third down, which that's going to kill you. If you're not good on third down, you're not going to win very many football games. And then, honestly, just not having that pass rush and an impactful defensive line really held them back. In games against the top teams in the NFL, that was an exploit or weakness that was exploited a lot. It was simply just a terrible, terrible front from week 1 to week 18. Another big issue was the skid at quarterback, right? I mentioned, the skid, right? It was a 4-game losing skid. It had 1 touchdown, 9 picks, and then the Bucs jumped them and never looked back at that point. But benching Kirk showed something that is a problem in the NFL, is impatience. In my opinion, I still would have let Kirk finish out the year and let Michael Penix just sit and develop. Because the situation, right? Atlanta's still fighting for a playoff spot. There's a lot of pressure. Every game's a must win. And throwing a rookie quarterback into that situation is not favorable. That's not a situation you want to throw a quarterback in. That's just not, it's dumb. It's dumb. Like, okay, this guy's sitting, learning, preparing, right? He's just, trying to adjust to the pro game. And it's like, okay, if you're a teacher, or you're a student and you're in class, right? And you have a test in a month. And so you have a month to prepare for this test. And then after the 2-week mark, you have to take the test. And it's like, well, where's the other 2 weeks? He was thrown into a situation that he shouldn't be thrown into and wasn't ready for because it wasn't necessary. You didn't need to assign that test 2 weeks early, but the teacher did. And you're not going to be in much of a position to succeed because you're not ready for the situation. You're not ready for the moment. You can't be. You simply can't be, and there's a lot of pressure there. So that's kind of the analogy I like to compare there with these two. But also, you gave Kirk this big contract. And what I've said was, you sign Kirk to a big contract, and you draft Michael Penix with a top 10 pick because you intend to start Kirk for at least 2 years to let Michael Penix really sit, learn, develop, and truly adjust to the pro game. In my opinion, if you're going to draft a rookie quarterback, even at the top of the draft, even if they're ready to start right away, you need to start them for 2 years minimum. If you want to maximize their quality in the NFL and their success for your franchise, you sit them for 2 years and literally let them just soak everything in that they can. Because by that point, you're going into year 3 and bam, they're going to be ready to play. Obviously, in the NFL, you're not going to see that, and that's not going to happen. Unless you're the Green Bay Packers, that's not happening because owners and fans, they want immediate success, and if the veteran quarterback or the bridge guy is not playing well, the impatience starts to settle in, then you start your rookie quarterback before they're ready to play, and let's see what we got in him, and it's like, okay, no, you don't do that. You do not do that. Almost every quarterback that gets drafted sits behind is doomed to start because the bridge quarterback is going to play bad or is going to get hurt, and then the rookie quarterback is going to go in, he's going to play well for a couple of games, and the team's going to be like, we're going to stick with him for the rest of the year and focus on his development, yet you're not focusing on his development if he's playing on the field because you're focused on winning games, right? The whole point of sitting him is for him to focus and for you as an organization to focus on his development, right? Starting him early does not help that. It does not help that. Sure, Michael Penix did play fine, but why would you even play him? Why? You're in a must-win situation. That's not a situation a rookie quarterback is meant to play in. Kirk, he was better suited for it, and would he have got you into the playoffs? I don't know. And that's not a discussion that's worth having because it's an entirely hypothetical one. But there's no doubt that he would have given him a better chance, in my opinion. If you really wanted to make the playoffs, there you go. If you want to make set a culture in year 1, right, with a new head coach, Raheem Morris, you start your veteran quarterback all the way through, and if you make the playoffs, whoop-de-doo. You're in the playoffs. Sure, you're going to be a first-round exit anyways, which kind of defeats the argument that I had when Kirk first got benched. but still, you're in the playoffs. The idea that you are a playoff team, just the fact that you made it there, that does a lot for your organization, does a lot for your culture. And instead, you got a team that was in the hunt, started a rookie quarterback, and they flamed out. So that's another big key of what went wrong. The next one, I kind of keyed on it, was the organizational impatience, which I kind of cleared all of it out, actually, if you want to go back and listen. But the other thing, too, was the secondary also underwhelmed. While they were good, like Jesse Bates was good, Justin Simmons was good, AJ Terrell was decent, everything else was just not that good. They finished 22nd, but also, as I mentioned, the defensive line was horrible. And when you don't have a good defensive line that can't get after the quarterback, your secondary is going to struggle because you're going to have to run with receivers longer. Like, you guys know the reasons why, but it is a big factor. But they finished 16th in turnovers and got only 12 interceptions, which also goes hand in hand. They didn't get enough turnovers. So there you go. Like, it was an underwhelming unit. But honestly, I'd be more willing to blame the defensive line, more I'm willing to blame the unit as a whole. And the thing was, with this defense, they fired their defensive coordinator, Jeremy Lake. He may have been the biggest problem. And apparently, Raheem Morris had to get more involved as the year went on with the defensive side of the football. And honestly, that was a good decision. If he was the issue, part of the issue, get rid of him. Get a guy that can really develop this defensive line. And honestly, had it been better, had that one position group been better, they probably would have made the playoffs. They probably would have. So getting rid of him was the first big thing, first big move that I thought was a good decision. And then they hired Jeff Ulbrich to be their defensive coordinator. And I like the move. It's a guy, he's a good defensive mind, more qualified for the situation. I know, obviously, being the interim Jets head coach left a bad taste in people's mouths. But looking at where he's supposed to be, this is a spot where he's supposed to be. Kind of like Matt Eberflus going to the Dallas Cowboys. He is a good defensive coach. And as a defensive coordinator, that's a position that he's more qualified for. So I would expect to see better production from there. So I kind of jumped the gun a little bit, but that's one of the things they need to do to get better, was get a better defensive coordinator, and they did that on paper, at least. But their three biggest needs, number one, obviously, is edge rusher. Edge rusher, they need that. They first round, if they don't come away with an edge rusher, it would be a massive disaster, in my opinion, because you have so many guys there at that spot. You have Nick Scoriton, you have James Pierce Jr., right? You have guys like Mike Green that are available. There is no reason that the Falcons do not come away with an edge rusher in the first round of the draft. There's no way. There's simply no way. So that is going to be their first round pick, almost guaranteed. If they don't, it's going to be a big issue, unless they draft a DB or something, which sure would help, but that's not where they really need help per se. The edge rusher group is where they need it, and also add a veteran edge rusher in free agency as well if you can, right? And also, wouldn't surprise me if the Falcons drafted two edge rushers, one on day one and one on day three as a developmental guy. They need youth at that position. They need talent at that position. And the edge rusher is very deep in this draft class. You got to come away with one in the first round and maybe come away with one on day three. There's literally no excuse to go after this position and really attack it with everything you got. And then the next one is DB. Not because of how bad they played per se. I mentioned, the defensive line had a lot to play in that, but there is multiple guys that are going to be free agents. So you're probably going to have to add a guy on day two, maybe add another corner in free agency, right? So you're going to need to supplement at that position just because there's players that are leaving. And the guys that are leaving probably aren't that worth re-signing, in my opinion. So go get some guys there, kind of fill in the spots, fill in the holes there, and kind of just solidify the position, I should say. Solidify the spot and really improve and add a lot of high-end talent at the edge spot. And now you're looking at a defense that has the pieces to actually give some improvement in 2025. And the last one, kind of nuanced, but it's center. Their center, I can't remember what his name is. He's going to be a free agent. I don't know if he comes back. He was kind of the worst part of that offensive line, which isn't saying much because he was still really good. But maybe you go get a center, right? You can get one in round 2, round 3. You can get one in the later rounds as a developmental guy and start him, right? Center is one of those positions that you don't have to pay a lot of money for because, center, It's like linebacker, it's like running back. You can get one of those guys on the later rounds of the draft, develop him, and he can be a good prospect for you. There's a couple guys in the later rounds of the draft that are pure centers with a lot of high upside. It's just because the position value isn't very high, they don't tend to go very high. So you can probably get one in the later rounds of the draft, like I said, for the third time. Jesus Christ. But it's done. It can be done. But overall, to conclude everything here, Michael Penix Jr. is the quarterback one. He showed promise. He's got a good offense around him, good offensive coordinator. He's going to be the biggest wild card / question mark for 2025 for this team. Straight up. But he does have the pieces around him to make it work. And I also mentioned the hiring of Jeff Ulbrich to be their defensive coordinator. So the thing is, if the quarterback can continue to improve and this defensive line can improve, if these two groups right now can improve, the Falcons will still be in the playoff hunt minimum. They will still be in the hunt minimum. And honestly, a floor for this team would be 8-9 again. Right? So they're close to being back in legitimately in that playoff conversation. But these two things, quarterback, edge rusher, they're going to have to be right. They're going to have to get right. And if they can, they will be in that conversation. But again, it is a question mark and something that we will be looking at big time as we make our next schedule prediction videos this upcoming August. But that will do it for me today, guys. Make sure to let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Let me know if you guys agree or disagree with my takes, and also what else you think the Atlanta Falcons should do to get better. Also, make sure to like and subscribe. Hitting those two buttons takes only a couple seconds, and it helps me out tremendously into growing this channel and growing the platform and continuing to spread my football passion for more and more people. And also, make sure you guys hit the share button, whether you're doing that on social media or you're just telling people by word of mouth about my podcast, getting as many people locked on and locked in to the Shumake Take podcast, coming out with great content for you guys every single week. I love making this stuff for you guys, and I would really appreciate it if you guys would do all that for me. Also, the Shumake Take Awards is out, so make sure to go check that out now. It is a video that I really enjoyed making. By far my greatest video I've ever made in terms of production value, editing, and whatnot. I really enjoyed making it. And also, it was the biggest video I've ever made. So I put a lot of time and effort into it. If you guys would check it out and watch the whole thing, I would appreciate it. But that will do it for me today, guys. Hope you guys have enjoyed it, and I will see you guys next time.